like seeing the room filled. That's awesome. Thank you all for coming. Let me get my notes here. Okay. Couple of announcements and then we'll get everything going. Again, Mark Richards, who is associated with the Triumph Foundation and the Southern California chapter of United Spinal, is going to be a speaker at a convention and is wanting first-hand experience stories with travel, hotels, any type of travel, any hotel rooms, good, bad, ugly. If you have pictures, that's even better. But he wants to make an impression on the designers attending his session. I guess I should say that, okay, so he submitted a proposal to the American Institute of Architects to present a seminar at their convention. Oh, sorry, it is just using hotel rooms. So he's asking if you have traveled, if you had pictures, videos of the positive and negatives of hotel rooms with stories attached to them. He would love to include that in his seminar. So if you have traveled, have pictures, have a story, and want to share with him, I can give you his information. Research study that we are doing here at Metro is a magic app plan on an iPad. It's an app that allows you to set up your floor plan of your house, and then from there we can see about durable medical equipment fitting in and things like that. The app is looking at whether the traditional method of home evaluations, how that compares to this magic app software. So
are you doing it via pictures on the phone that they would send you?
No, I would give them an iPad and a laser.
Okay.
There's a 5-minute video on the iPad to teach you how to work the software.
Great.
And then there's a survey on the iPad that we would need you to do. I ask you 4 questions and then we pay you $50. So if you're interested, let myself or Ariel in the back know. We can get you set up with that. Someone had donated a bunch of items. If you received the email for tonight's meeting, I put pictures of the items in there. They are now at a Center for Independent Living. I do have a contact information. I do know that the ramp is gone, and somebody asked about the shower chair, so I'm assuming that will be gone. Other than that, I have no idea what's still around, but I can give you the contact person at the Center for Independent Living. Couple tickets to Playhouse. There's a set for a band's, or is it 2 sets? Okay, so there's 1 set of 2 for the band's visit on Sunday, November 10th. And then there's a set for Mean Girls Thursday, December 5th, and two or a set for Sunday, December 8th. So if you want to go to a band's visit or Mean Girls, we have tickets. There's tickets to Cavs games Thursday, November 14th versus Miami, or Friday, December 20th versus Memphis. If you are interested, let Jeff know. 2020 SEI Forum, September 25th. I'll just start announcing it now. Yes, I know, it was just a few weeks ago. It was great. I guess it was almost a month ago, huh? It was awesome. are wanting to help out with the chapter, find speakers, find sponsors, be on the board, help grow the chapter, help keep this going, let me know. Love to talk to you. I think that's all my announcements, so I will be quiet. But first we have Jason Parsons here from Quantum, sponsoring our meeting, so we absolutely thank you for that.
Thanks
Much
for having me.
appreciated.
Yeah.
Dude is amazing. And he's just going to kind of tell us a little about Quantum.
Yeah, so about 15 minutes.
Sure.
So, again, Jason Parsons, Quantum Rehab. I am the Northeast Ohio rep. So I come into Metro quite often to help with wheelchair evals, programming, different things like that, setting up assistive technologies to the power wheelchairs to kind of get the chairs to not only be an independent drive device, but be an independent environmental control along with the mobility aspect of it. So with our electronics, some of the things that we can do is we can incorporate TV, VCR, infrared controls that an individual may do. Our proportional joystick can work as a mouse simulator. So if you have a computer, an iPad, a telephone, especially Android because they have built-in mouse simulation, you can be controlling the mouse emulator with your joystick. So there's a lot of things that we can do. We try to incorporate all parts of it through the evaluation process. But at Quantum Rehab, we are a power wheelchair manufacturer and a drive control systems manufacturer. So in the power wheelchair side of things, we offer a front wheel drive, a mid wheel drive, and a rear wheel drive. Rear wheel drives, we hardly ever see them as much as we used to 10 years ago because of the stability that we're getting out of, say, a front wheel drive with gyrating motors in the back and sensors back there to tell what the rear casters are doing. But really, rear wheel drive chairs are out there for really top speed because they do have the best stability at top speed. So a lot of the VA games, I don't know if you guys ever had the opportunity to go to a VA games. They're great to go to if you ever have the opportunity. When they start doing the races, almost every chair, 99% of chairs we see out there in the races are all rear wheel drive chairs. So it kind of gives you an idea of the stability. Now the bad thing is anybody that's ever driven a rear wheel drive chair, I think there's one in here. There it is right there. They do have a large sweeping turning radius. So when you're trying to get them into tighter confined areas, it can be a little tougher to make those turns than say a mid-wheel drive. This is a mid-wheel drive chair that I brought with me today. So any questions on mid-wheel drives, if anybody wants to try it, they're more than welcome to. But as far as controls go, we'll kind of touch into that just briefly. So I think everybody has kind of seen or has heard of a proportional joystick control, and that's what's on this chair here. Proportional drive joystick control works just like a gas pedal in a car. So you move it just a little bit, chair is going to go nice and slow, move it all the way to the stop point, it's going to go the max speed within that set given parameter for that drive. With the electronics that we have here, we can set up to 6 different drive parameters. So you can have an indoor slow, you can have an indoor moderate, outdoor fast. An individual may want to have a latched mode for proportional drive controls. Latch control would be they give a forward command, they let go of the joystick, the chair is going to drive forward for a set amount of time. Then all they're doing is just giving it fine-tuned left and right controls. Not really something you want to set up indoors, but it is kind of nice if you have an end user that's going down a 2-mile sidewalk to get to the store, going to Cedar Point. It is kind of nice, especially if they're using, let's say, a head array, to where they give that back pad control and that chair is driving straight for them and they don't have to worry about coming on or off that back pad to keep the chair going. All right. A lot of different things that we can do with the proportional drive control. We can change the directional input itself. So if we have an end user to where they can't throw that joystick all the way forward, but they can pull it all the way back, we can invert that forward and reverse. We can invert left or right if the individual would like so. We can change how much deflection it takes to see 100% of throw. So right now, this is set at 100%. So for me to achieve 100%, I have to go all the way to the stop point, which is about 1.5 inches throw. Well, if I have somebody that's using, let's say, a taller joystick knob, they may not be able to get to that full 100%. They may only get to 10% on that outside throw of the joystick. So again, the programming of the chair, we can go in there and fine tune what the patient's needs are as far as what they can do with the joystick. Now, if we have somebody that is no longer able to use that proportional drive control system, that's when we start looking at a non-proportional drive control system. So what that's going to be, think of it as kind of like a light switch. So it's an on or off, it's switched input drive. So that could be a sip and puff system. I think does everybody kind of know what a sip and puff system is and kind of roughly how they work? Out pressure, in pressures. It allows an input to be given into the system to drive the chair in a certain direction. There is a head array. We do have a head array user that's here right now. So head array, 3-switch head array, what it uses are proximity sensors that are built around a headrest, very similar to this one. And as the end user gets close to that switch, predefined, we can go in there and adjust how close we need them to get to the pad. But we would have 3 sensors, left and right, and the back pad would be for forward and reverse commands. So we can take that system and do a lot with just 3 directions. So we can tap back pad release, that's going to change from forward and reverse. Again, our left and right pads are going to be our turns, but we can do some double commands on the left or right pads to change modes. They may need to get into their seating systems. So there's a lot of things that we can incorporate into those 3 switches to do more than just drive the chair. All right. Seating functions, we have the Elevate that's shown here. On this model, it's 13 inches of elevation, but still allowing the end user to drive 4.5 miles an hour. That was one of the important things of the owner of our company, Scott Muser. So we used to make a system that was an elevating seat, and it would only allow the end user to drive at about 2.5 miles an hour, and the end user would have to stop the chair, go into seat mode, pull it back on the joystick, and sit there until the chair elevated all the way up. Well, Scott Muser, the owner of our company, had a friend of his come in from New York and spent a weekend with him in Pennsylvania. They went to New York, and he came back to our engineering department on that next Monday and he said, this is unacceptable. Every time my friend would need to either raise up or down, they would have to stop and wait for all of us. And Scott Muser said, that's no way for an end user to be in a power wheelchair. We have to change this. One, they need to drive faster. So our engineers came out with eye level, the 4.5 miles an hour. Then we came out with latched feature on our actuators. So what an end user can do, they can go in and we can program whether it's an external switch somewhere that they operate with their head, their elbow, their knee, one of the buttons that are on the joystick. They hit that button, the chair starts elevating, they're driving simultaneously. They don't have to go into the seat mode, hold the joystick back, waiting for the system to elevate. So, you know, it's one of those things that as a family-owned company, I think we listen pretty good. You know, here was this friend that came in and said, you know, this is what I have to deal with every day. Scott Muser came back to our engineers and said, that's unacceptable. We don't want that out of our product. We want something that seems, that kind of is, that integrates better into their active lifestyle. So, pretty cool that it launched within 6 months of the owner of our company going to our engineering department. So he's very passionate about what he does. There are, go ahead, question.
Can my chair do that?
It can. Yeah, yours is new enough.
How do I get it to do that?
So what we would do first is we would just take a handheld programmer and we would set that seating function to latched.
Okay.
And that's all we have to do. And we can either take your number 1 button, let's say on your joystick, if you don't use that all that often, that number 1 button could be for your elevate to latch that and start the elevation process.
Okay.
And then you don't have to go into the seat mode to flip that forward or hit your number 2 button, you just go right into it. All right? Who did you get your chair from? Was it Health Aid?
Yes.
Okay. Was it Lisa?
Yes.
Give Lisa a call. We'll come out there. We'll come meet you somewhere together, Lisa and I, and then we'll do and we can even do, like I said, we can do an external switch somewhere. If you like to have that number 1 button used for what it is now, we can use an external switch somewhere on the armrest or something like that.
Okay.
So yeah, just give Lisa a call and we'll come out there and do that. All right? Yeah. Any other questions so far? I know I'm trying to cover a lot in a little amount of time, so if I'm going too fast. So, and what I wanted to touch on, go ahead.
When I release my joystick, I seem to coast a little bit more than I would like to. And
Yes.
I bang the drywall of my house.
Yep, it happens quite often.
Yeah.
So
can that be adjusted?
it sure can, yeah. So within each drive parameter that you have right now, we have about 27 different individual drive characteristics of how that chair performs. So we have forward speed, forward acceleration, turn speed, turn acceleration, braking speed, how fast the chair will decelerate. You know, we don't want to have it at 100% because at 100% it'll make the rear tires come off the ground. You know, but we want to find a happy, you know, percentage there that's safe for inside your home, and you may find that your outdoor drives, you don't want that braking percentage to be up so high. So, you know, with you buying your chair secondhand, that end user that originally got that chair, they for some reason probably like that. For, you know, I'm not a big fan of it taking a long time to brake. I feel once we say to ourselves as power wheelchair users, we release that joystick, we want to go, okay, I want this thing to stop. You know, if I want to just slow down, I just release some of the joystick throw that I have given it, and then we come to a slow stop. So, but it can be programmed.
Okay.
All right. Any other questions on so far? Okay.
What's the maximum height and seat lift that you have for yours?
13 inches is
That's the max?
yeah. Yeah, lowest seat to floor height from the seat pan, not counting the cushion, at its lowest point, our lowest is 17 inches. We can.
And what happens if, I'm sure there's users out there that their batteries died.
Yes.
How do you get it to drop back down?
So there's a couple different things that we have. We have a bus cable that would be plugged into that actuator, tucked into a bag. It unhooks after about that much line, and they would a 9-volt battery, and we usually tell people carry a 9-volt battery with you, clip it on there, and that will at least lower them down. So if they have to get it into a vehicle, a van, or anything like that, it'll at least lower them down. Good question, though. Very good question. But there's nothing external the way it sits now. They have to have that.
No hand crank.
There's no. There used to be years ago, believe it or not, there used to be years ago. Yeah, I used to use old hospital, if you remember the old hospital bed cranks, to get the height up and down. It used that same kind of handle that would lower them down, but we got rid of that, and now we just have that little tether, that little wire that they would tuck into the back and hook up to a 9-volt battery. Yeah.
When you're up that high, is there any tip sensors or anything if you go over an edge?
There is.
Or go diagonally?
Yeah. Yeah, so if any one of our casters senses that it's off
Well, even if the casters are all on there, when you're on an incline or something where you're at a point.
no incline sensors in the system. No, it's just sensing if a tire comes off the ground.
That'll stop on that.
It'll slow it down. We thought about having a auto stop, but we have it on the front of our brochure. You'll see a gentleman named Brian Anderson. He is one of our individuals. We actually employ Brian Anderson. He is not just somebody that was in our brochure. We actually employ him. He was unfortunately hit by an IED during the war, and he is a very, very active wheelchair user. And when he went to our engineering department, he said, listen, I don't want the chair to come to a stop. I just want the chair to slow itself down and let me know that I'm doing something wrong. Because if I am on the wrong terrain, sometimes a abrupt stop can be worse than it slowing itself down. So if he's elevated 13 inches and that chair does lose contact with the ground, if there is an abrupt stop in the system, it could actually keep that momentum going in that side versus a deceleration to say, hey, something's going on, you may want to stop and take a look at what's happening. So that's why we chose not to do an e-stop, an emergency stop. All right. Yeah.
What I noticed with mine is if I have it elevated, even if it's just slightly elevated, I have to put it all the way down, it will give me like a motor fault warning and won't let me go up. I'm out. Is that how it's supposed to be?
So yeah, that's a suspension lockout. So after 1 inch of elevation, that's when that eye level suspension sets in, because our system right now, when the seat's all the way down, we have 4 inches of articulation of that suspension system. That's a lot of articulation. We don't want to give somebody 4 inches of elevation when they're up this high, because what we want the system to do is lock itself out so the individual doesn't come tipping forward. So it's a natural lockout system that's doing exactly what this chair is doing right now. And the sensors that are built in there are telling you that, hey, you're elevated just a little bit.
Yeah, it took me a minute
So,
to figure it out.
yeah, yep.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
Do you have a chair that elevates and also tilts back?
This does tilt back.
It does.
Yeah. So the way that the chairs come out of box, and we like to keep them this way, we can only tilt back 15 degrees. Now we can go more. We do have some very high-end clients that that they've been in chairs for 15 plus years, and they know that if they're staring at the ceiling, they know not to drive when they're tilted back. There's some end users that we don't want to give them full elevation and full tilt because, again, they can drive at 4.5 miles an hour. So it's a lockout feature that's built in there. This system, when it's elevated down right now, will go tilt back 65 degrees is what our system will do, all right? But again, those are stop points that we can go in there and set in the programming. So again, everything can be set up for that end user. You know, we may have Mrs. Smith who's in a nursing home to where, you know, maybe cognitively, she may forget that she's tilted back too far to see a straight line of sight, start driving and run into a wall. So again, it's all just depends on the end user, and it's all programmable for that specific user. All right, good question. All right, any other questions?
I'm not running the machines that we're used to. Quite expensive.
They can get expensive, they can, yeah.
That vehicle right there that you got, where we're talking.
So there's a fake number in this industry, and not just the medical equipment industry, but example, my son is on a growth hormone. One round of it, they billed my insurance $13,000 for one round of this synthetic growth hormone. My insurance came back and said the allowable of it is $3,080. My insurance is going to pay 80% of that allowable. Well, that $10,000 was just kind of a fake number out there. We see the same thing. So we have an MSRP dollar amount on this chair of about $27,000. But the allowable that an insurance company may pay, depending on what it is, say Medicare, may only be about, say, $8,000 or $9,000. And the company that's providing the chair has to accept that allowable by your insurance company. They can't bill the difference.
What if you're paying cash?
Paying cash, a lot of DME companies out there, they will give what's called a cash pay discount. So what they will do is they will take their cost and they'll mark it up a very reasonable amount, which we like to hear. Some will go by allowable. Yeah, it just depends on the company. Yeah. There's some companies out there that I hear do things very, very well. Whether it's for a K5 manual or a Group 3 power wheelchair, there's some companies that do things very nice to where they do go off allowable. If you are paying cash for a backup chair or a secondary chair, some hardly ever do they go off MSRP. Now they may tell you in the quote that this is the MSRP to kind of go sticker shock, but most go off allowable cost. But that's up to the dealer. The dealer networks, just like a Ford dealer in Elyria, they can choose to sell that Ford vehicle for whatever they want to. We try to leave a gap system there, a cap system there, so they can't sell it above MSRP. We try to watch out for that, but they can sell up to MSRP if they want to.
What kind of other products is Quantum involved in?
What's that?
What other kind of products is
What other products are we involved in? So we are power wheelchairs. We used to have a full manual line. We did K5, K3, all the way to K1. Scott Muser, the owner of our company, wanted to focus. He wanted to be the best manufacturer for power mobility. So what we did is we actually sold our manual wheelchair line because our stylus, our K5 rigid, we hadn't changed it in like 4 years. And Scott, and anybody here in a K5 manual knows that there's a lot to a K5 manual wheelchair. And you're either in it or you're not. And we were seeing a company like Key Mobility, Sunrise, to where they were just putting a lot of engineering dollars in, and we couldn't keep up with it. We knew we couldn't. So we just decided to sell our brand. So we are power mobility, so power wheelchairs, front wheel drive, mid wheel drive, and rear wheel drive. And then we are a seating company. So seating components as far as cushions, custom backs, line of back rests now we do offer them for K5s. We do carbon fiber back rests. We do carbon fiber seat pans, positioning components, and then we do a full line of drive control systems like we were talking about with the head arrays or the sip and puffs, the proportional drive controls, whether it's the size of my pinky for a proportional drive control system, or it's the one that you see on the chairs that I have here with me now. And that's our line.
Are you a distributor for power systems?
No, we are not. We wish we would offer something like that, but we do not. So I think right now Power Assist Sunrise Medical is offering them. I think they actually manufacture their own, and then your system is the
Smart Drive.
Smart Drive, and that's through
Permobile.
There are, yep. Yeah, there's many different ones. Unfortunately, we don't offer one. Like I said, our whole K5 line, it was not easy for us to get rid of. But Scott Muser knew the product that we had was inferior to what was out there, and he wanted to put a lot of engineering dollars into this. He is talking to a company that's based out of Florida. They make a super nice K5 rigid chair that we're trying to talk to them to see if we can maybe offer another K5 and manual line in the future. Same way Permobile bought Key. You know, they saw a great company that had great potential. They felt with the dollars that they had, they could take it to the next level, and they did. They did it very well. You know, is anybody in a Key chair here? Any Key mobilities in here? So if you guys start seeing them at any trade shows that you go to, they are making a great K5 product. So not to say anything bad about Sunrise. If anybody's in Sunrises or in the carriers, they make great stuff too. Any other questions?
Suppliers, you mentioned one, someone, talking like billers, talking like maybe Hastings, talking like Wills.
That would be the dealer network, yeah. So if you go to quantumrehab.com, top right corner, we have a dealer locator button. You hit that, you type in your zip code, and it'll give you a whole list of dealers that are in here. Give you all of them. They're all good. We all have to uphold a certain standards. There's HIPAA. There is Joint Commission accreditation. They all have to uphold a certain integrity when they're doing business. We hope they do that day to day. If not, Joint Commission's always a phone call away.
If you order a chair or you go to a seating, what would you say?
Seating clinic.
And we recommend that you have a chair to do a certain thing, you want your embellish it with another feature or something that they don't necessarily recommend. People like to have that.
Yeah.
Pay that out of your.
You sure can. Yeah, that's an option. So, you know, one of the things that, and we hire an individual named Julie Periano. She's a physical therapist by trade, and what her role at Quantum Rehab is to travel this great nation and fight with all the insurance companies. You know, she's in Washington several times a month, going in front of our lobbyists and our senators. We hired a lobbyist to go to Washington to basically say this is what we need to have covered by these insurance companies, and we keep fighting the good fight. But one of them is the E2300 that you see right here, the elevating seat. So Medicare very clearly states in their manual that they will not cover an E2300 power elevating seat, or standard for that matter. So Julie Periano goes to a lot of these insurance companies to say, no, you need to pay for it, and here's why. So we're trying to do our part as a manufacturer to also educate the insurance payers to allow an end user to get everything that they can, you know, and not have to look at that as an option. To not go, wow, on that demo, I really like that power elevating seat, but it's not covered. Okay, I'll look to purchase it. That's what medical insurance is for. You know, and if we have an end user that has been using a manual wheelchair, and let's say they come into a clinic to where that range of motion is now compromised, you know, and now they need to still live in their home and not redo the kitchen, and they want to get to that cupboard on the side that's high up. This is what that's going to allow them to do, and we're trying to tell the insurance companies and inform them that it is a medical product. You know, it's not a luxury, as Medicare likes to use that term on it, believe it or not. That's exactly the wording they use. It's a luxury, not a medical necessity. Which is sad.
Awesome.
Any other questions?
I need to revamp my chair. So
Yeah.
if I get a hold of Kim,
Yep, that's it.
have her call you.
Yep, Teresa, Kim, and I will all get together, and we'll do, you know, and it comes down to the point to where we do, you know, seating evaluations, but then we do electronic evaluations. We sit down and we look, okay, this is what we need to do to your head array system, and we'll all do that as a team. Now, one thing that I will never do is I love to work with individuals that are in my product. Even if it's not my product, I try to do everything I can to help that end user, but I always involve the therapist, and I always involve whatever ATP you're working with. So you're working with somebody from NPL, you're working for somebody from Health Aid. I always try to involve that ATP so everybody's informed of what's happening with your chair. All right. So yeah, just call Kim, call Teresa, and they'll get me involved, and we'll meet back out there.
We'll do that.
All right. Any other questions?
Getting back to the to the moment, or the section that you were just indicating about Medicare and Medicare agreeing that something is a luxury. I think that in the case that they would assume that it is reasonable and required, opens a whole big door of other areas that they would have to pay for, and that their board of directors and the things that they need
Yeah,
to govern their finances,
you better believe it.
you know,
So years ago when
stop right there.
Yes, and that's it. So power tilt. Power tilt and power recline for somebody that is not able to self-pressure relief. Medicare at one point would not pay for tilt. They would pay for recline, power recline, but they would not pay for power tilt. So as manufacturers, we would...
What's the difference?
So power tilt is where the back and the seat itself moves together on this fulcrum point right here. Power recline is to where just the backrest is opening up independently. So what it'll do is it'll actually lay somebody down. So self-cath, perineal care, anything like that, it saves a transfer for somebody who's using a power wheelchair, so they don't have to go from bed to chair from their perineal duties through the day. So what we did as manufacturers, and Invacare was a big component of this back in the early 90s and the late 80s, and they kind of were the ones that helped single-handedly get power tilt covered by Medicare. You know, and we're trying to carry on that torch, and so is Invacare, you know, to help try to educate these insurance payers that the stuff that we're trying to put on here is a medical necessity and not just a luxury, that terrible term that they put on the stuff.
Invacare is global anyways, so that they'd see that.
We're global too. We're global. Our world headquarters is in Exeter, Pennsylvania. Invacare's is right in Elyria.
Sure.
So
Sure.
my dad retired from there.
Good.
Know that company very well.
Okay.
So yeah. Any other questions? How are we doing time wise? Are we like rush? We good?
Yeah,
Okay, cool. Any other questions?
Should be done.
What was typically a front mid or drive?
So during the drive evaluation, one of the questions that will be asked is, you know, where are you going to be driving the chair at? You know, one of the biggest things that we try to look at is, you know, what in-home mobility needs do you need assistance with? Because again, when it comes to the wonderful insurance companies that we try to play this game with, their main concern is inside your home. If we have an end user that comes into a seating clinic, let's say with Medicare, and they say, listen, I don't need it for inside my home, I use my K5, but I need it for outside my house. I live on a farm, I have a mile-long driveway to get my mail, I want to go out and still feed the chickens, I want to use my manual chair for going outside and just using my chair in my house. They won't pay for it. Medicare will not pay for that chair. So it all depends on what they're using inside their home. Now what we try to figure out is, we try to find a base that'll do all of them. So front-wheel drive bases. Front-wheel drive bases, your typical 14-inch drive tire, which is in the center of this one, is to the front of the base. So what you're doing is that those drive tires are pulling the whole system over the obstacle. There's nothing being pushed into that obstacle. Now, one of the downfalls of a front-wheel drive chair is typically weight is higher because your batteries are bigger. The chair is longer typically, so your turning radius is going to be greater. So that's one of the downfalls. So if somebody lives in a mobile home, typically a front-wheel drive chair is not going to work for that end user because they need to turn it around in a very, very small area. So those are some of the plus and minuses of a front-wheel drive chair. Mid-wheel drive chairs, they work really, really well in tight areas because they do have the smallest footprint when it comes to a turning radius. So again, those tight areas, that's going to be your best choice for a base. Now, some of the downfalls of a mid-wheel drive base is you have two front casters that are pushing down into the ground because they're front-loaded. They're meant to travel up and down, just like the wheels on our car. They're always pushing down. So if we go over large gravel, mud, we are now driving those front casters and pushing them down into that soft terrain. So that could get somebody stuck to where the drive tires lose traction. Rear-wheel drive chairs have the largest turning radius of all the bases out there just because of the nature of how they turn. Now, yours works great for you because it is one of the rarest folding bases that were ever out there because you know you can take your batteries off, you can take your cushion off, and she can fold her chair up just like you do. You have a Ridges. Who has a folding? Just like a folding chair right there. So, but though nobody makes that chair anymore. Well, I think Orbit, I think there's an overseas company that's making kind of a version of a Neutron, but I'm not hearing great things about it. It's not holding up like that. That was made by Invacare years ago. They don't make it anymore. I don't know why they stopped making it, but the industry misses that chair, trust me. But again, rear-wheel drive chairs, you still have the front casters in the front that have a tendency to dive down into soft surfaces. But again, what a rear-wheel drive chair will do really, really well is it'll drive fast, very, very smooth. Front-wheel drive chairs, so on his chair, for example, he has two back casters that are back there that give him stability. And there's two gyrating sensors that are in there that tell his system where his casters are. If you were to turn those sensors off and try to drive that chair at 6 miles an hour, those start to do the shopping cart thing. That's what we call, they start fluttering around. And what they do is they force that chair to go into a tail whipping scenario. That's why I don't have any of your sensors ever failed on you. So if they do fail, what it does is it puts you into a drive inhibit. You can still drive, but you can only drive at like 0.7 miles an hour because they don't want you spinning out. So you have some things there with every base that's out there. They all have their good and their bads. Just depends on the end user's driving habits more than driving. Any other questions?
I want to give Maria her
sorry.
time, so.
Sometimes you guys start throwing stuff at me. I get talking, I can keep going.
Yeah.
So,
No,
all right,
thank
you everyone. It was nice meeting everybody. I appreciate it.
Awesome. Well, while Maria comes up here, 2 things I forgot. One, there is a sign-in sheet back by the food. Please sign in. If you've been here at any point in the year, just find your name, put a check at the end. If this is your first meeting, name, email at least would be appreciated. And then the Metro Parks has an adaptive hike and cooking camp cooking program on Saturday. Registration closes Friday morning. It'll be a 1 to 2 mile hike on natural surface terrain, and followed by campfire and cooking activities. It is, yep. It's, adaptive hike and camp cooking program. I don't know why I can't remember that. So if you're interested in this,
Where do we see that?
I don't know.
Where do we see that message at?
right here. If you have signed up with Matt, like at the forum or when he was here, you should have gotten an email. I did not get an email, but should be on the Metro Parks website. If you're interested.
Matt's great, by the way.
So hopefully, yeah.
I have a lot of stuff to burn, but don't do it.
How was Vegas?
Vegas was awesome. If you don't know, I went to the chapter leadership meeting for United Spinal earlier this month. It was in Las Vegas. Weather was beautiful. The meeting was great. We focused a lot on administrative tasks. I did not gamble. My boyfriend came back a winner though. $300-ish, I think. Awesome. No?
What is doing that on me?
So?
I guess. I don't know. I have 7,000 pieces of technology. Okay, well, guess that was my entry.
So we have Maria Sutter here. She, from what I've heard, is a pro at all things caregivers. So she's here to give us her tips and tricks and resources. And she had a great PowerPoint, but the projector is not working. So sorry about that.
Yeah, you'll kind of have to stare at me, but it also probably is good because it'll shorten it up, I think.
Go for it.
Sure. So, as Megan said, my name is Maria. I have been in the area for 15 years since my bicycle accident. I live down in Medina County, but I'm like a half a mile from Summit. And what that poses is Summit County, which has a bigger city, Akron, you get easier time finding caregivers. Medina County, they think you're out in the boonies and they're gonna have to go through cornfields, and you get no one. And consequently, I have had to become very creative in how to hire and find personal care assistants. So what I'll do is kind of give you a brief overview of what a personal care assistant is, the different ways to pay for them, and then should you decide to go it on your own and move away from an agency, what I have found as good hiring practices. So I brought some folders with some handouts, which I guess is pretty good, and I will tell you they are way more than I use, but it should get you set up for kind of a hiring process from kind of A to Z. And I can provide like digital copies of things if people want them, and I can always be reached to kind of go over stuff more in detail. So, you know, what is a personal care aide? I think most of us probably know, because at one time we either have or had a personal care aide, but you have to think about calling them all kinds of different names. So you're going to hear personal care assistant, home health aide, attendant, direct caregiver, direct care staff. My nieces like to call them my helpers. You know, state tested nursing assistant, nurse's aide, all of these things. And essentially what do? They are there, in my opinion, the bottom line is they are there to help you do tasks that you would typically perform for yourself if your disability were not present. So you're going to hear people say, you know, they're there to help you with your ADLs, so your activities of daily living, which is true, but that's not where you should think they should stop. I mean, if you like stamp collecting, they should darn well grab a tweezer and help you collect your stamps and put them in. So as you're going through this, you know, think of them in a broader sense. You know, like I said, typically people say they're going to help you get dressed and shower, but they really should do well beyond that. And, you know, it used to be that the caregiver thought of you as someone who was sick or impaired, but now they should really consider you as a person that they're there to help live as independently as possible and to overcome whatever environmental barriers you have. And also help you advocate for your civil rights. So, you know, if you're someone who wants to go to a meeting and you need somebody to help you get there to do it, you know, that's what your aide should also be able to do. I mean, if you ask my aide who was here this afternoon, I had her collating and stapling papers, so definitely not just helping with my daily living needs. You should also think that they don't just assist you in your home, they should be able to go anywhere that you go. I have traveled like 4 times this year, and every time I take an aide with me. It's tricky to figure out how to get it paid for, but Medicaid covers it. You just have to figure out how to make it happen. So, I mean, the bottom line is you have to be creative, and if you want it, you have to figure out how to get it. That's exactly it. Well, that's how I approach things. So that kind of dovetails into how to pay for your personal care aide. And it's basically going to break down into private pay or insurance. But it's kind of private pay and insurance is the way you might have to spin it. So typically your private pays, you think it's out of pocket. And that's definitely true. But there's also grants that are out there that are available. There's assistance programs like OOD, which used to be called vocational rehab. They have grant programs to help you with personal care aids. The VA has programs. There are local like organizations like LEAP. They have a PCA program. So there are other ways to do it. One thing that came up when I was researching this is the idea of bartering for your services, which, I mean, if you're a math whiz and you have an aide who has a kid who needs a math tutor, you can say, hey, if you come over for 2 hours in the evening, you make dinner, I'll tutor your kid. So at first it sounded really unrealistic, but I guess, you know, if you can make it work, you can make it work. Insurance is going to be either your private insurance, which is starting, some insurances are starting to see that aids are a necessity, and they are starting to cover it. It's still very, very slim, but it is starting. Medicare will cover things like if you're just getting out of the hospital and you're returning home, they may pay for an aide that'll come in once or twice a week for maybe a month to help you shower. So again, that's very limited. And then Medicaid is going to be the insurance provider that is going to give you the most coverage. And that would be like through their waiver programs. Like the DODD has waiver, and there's a home and community-based services waiver. And if that's something that you need help with, it's a whole discussion of itself, but I'm happy to tell you what I know about Medicaid, and unfortunately it's a lot. But. So when you're starting to try to figure out who you're going to work with, you're going to look, if you're private pay, you have a bigger variety of people you can look at. So home care agencies, self-employed STNAs, non-certified aides, family, friends, students, neighbors. You can pretty much pay anyone if you're paying them out of pocket. Some insurances will cover more than just agencies, but typically if you're going the insurance route, it's going to be a home care agency or an approved independent provider. And the difference kind of between agency and the self-hire or the IP, which is short for independent provider, is something you have to consider as you're going into this. A lot of times, if it's your first kind of, I don't know how I am doing this. Honestly, I have no idea. Technology is great, but when you have too much, it does its own thing. And I mean, with a Bluetooth and an iPad and an iPhone and a watch, I don't know. So your agency versus your self-hire is pretty much what you're going to look at, because it's you know, the thing that's out there the most. Agencies, you're going to have them, you know, they're going to provide aids. Many of them are certified state-tested nursing assistants, but not all. It depends on the agency. If you're getting a self-hire, you decide if you want them to be certified or not. Agencies typically will provide backups, but let me tell you, this is not guaranteed. It's becoming less and less a thing. If you're getting an IP, you have to find your own backups. But sometimes you can really set up your backup system. If you have a bunch of independent providers, they'll work together. The agency is in charge of doing the hiring, the firing, the scheduling, paying taxes for everyone. If you're self-hiring, then you or someone you trust is going to be responsible for some, if not all, of these actions. And though agencies will do the scheduling for you, you also have to remember that they're doing the scheduling for everyone that is using their services. So you may find that they'll alter when your shift starts, when it ends, who's coming. You might think one person's coming one day and it's another person that they had to fill in. And they do that at their discretion. If you have a self-hire or an independent provider, you can set up the schedule, which means you have the benefit of figuring out who you want when you want them, but you also have the responsibility of making sure people are there. With an agency, your personal care assistant is limited to what they can do. So there are very few agencies that will allow your PCA to drive you. But if it's an independent provider, they have a wider scope of services they can provide, and you can work that out amongst yourselves. And then agencies will always charge a higher rate per hour. So they are not going to pay the assistant that higher rate, but they're going to ask you for that higher rate. Versus if you are working directly with someone, you can, predetermine what the rate for the service is going to be and work it out together. Now, I've been using the term independent provider, and it's a key term. If you have Medicaid, you may know something about this. Medicaid offers a system where individuals can become registered Medicaid independent providers. And you can then utilize the network of independent providers that exist, or what I find is you just have to create your own. Medicaid does offer a couple websites that, if the PowerPoint was working, you would see, that help you find a provider. I will caution you that they aren't kept up very well, and I have like 9 independent providers, and none of them are on the list. Well, I take that back. One shows up sometimes. My dad is an independent provider. He shows up nowhere. So it is tricky to use these existing lists. I find I come across existing independent providers by word of mouth. I have 3 nurses, and they all started off because I found one, and she has gotten me the others. The other way to use Medicaid independent providers is to establish your own IP. I have found probably the greatest success doing this, and I go and stalk the University of Akron's nursing program. And I mean, I stalk them. I spend afternoons there jumping in and out of classrooms. I take flyers down. I ask people that already are there if they can, help me network, and then I turn those people into my IPs. And that requires them doing an application, and there's a bunch of papers you have to sign and submit, and they have to get first aid certified and do a background check. So all of that is doable with almost anyone you know. Family becomes a little bit of an issue. There's some guidelines for how family can be your IP, but it's very individual. So if it's something that you're interested in, I'm happy to help guide you through the process. But it does take, they'll tell you about 3 months, and if you're really on it and have everything together and everything works perfectly, it takes about 3 months. So you just have to know that going in. So with all of that as your foundation for what is a PCA and how to pay for them and all that, we should talk about really, if you're gonna find your own, if you're not gonna go the agency route, how do you do it? And there's really 3 steps. You first have to kind of determine your needs, and then you have to go through a hiring process, and then once you have your aides in place, you really have to nurture the relationship. So you have to figure out how to manage and maintain it. So in your packet, there is a priorities sheet that's a good guide for how to figure out what your preferences are. The preferences can be, do I want to work with someone my age? Do I want to work with someone who's a family member? Do I want them to be professionally trained? Do I want one assistant to do all my hours? Do I want multiple assistants? Those are the things that are your priorities. Those are all very personal, and they are also things that you can't necessarily interview for, which, as we go through, there's a whole checklist of things to avoid asking. But you really need to do a self-evaluation of what you really want and need to make sure that this is a successful, endeavor that you're going to go through. The next sheet in there is like a job duties worksheet, and it's broken into like 3 different categories: personal care, homemaking, and other needs. And on it I have a couple columns that talk about, for example, dressing. You would kind of evaluate your situation and how many shifts per day do you need people to help you to dress? How many days of the week do you need that? How many hours per day would you say that's going to take? And then how high is it on your priorities? And then any notes, like if you have, I use a Hoyer lift and that's integral to getting me dressed. So that would be something that when I'm looking for someone, I would want to make sure either I feel they can be trained to do it comfortably or they already have skills for that. So on the job duties worksheet that's in the packet that I passed out, and if anyone wants, like I said, digital copies, please just get in touch and I can send things. It goes through a laundry list of stuff to create your priorities. And it's going to become really helpful when you're interviewing to know what really are your priorities, what are your big needs, what are your wish list items, and once you have your aide, how to set up what their responsibilities are going to be. The last thing that I have in as far as determining your needs is a what happens if my PCA ... backup action plan. If you are hiring your own person, you have to remember they are living their life just as you are. They have constraints in their life outside of you, and things will happen. I find it beneficial to know what you're going to do if they call off a day before their shift, or 6 hours before, or they don't show up at all, or if they need something like sick leave or maternity leave. And I suggest on this sheet that is also in the packet that you come up with the options for who's going to fill in if these things happen, and what are the consequences, what are the ramifications. I mean, if they worked at an agency, a no-show is a fire. Is that how you're going to draw the line, or is there something else you're going to put in place? And I find that if you work through this backup plan, it helps minimize the stress as you go through the process and once you have the aid. So once you have your needs determined, you really want to think about the hiring process, which is going to require advertising, interviewing, and then making the offer and sealing the deal. So the first thing, and there's a worksheet in the packet, is writing an ad. In my personal experience, you're going to need print, electronic, personal ads, which can be, things that you hand out in person, or, things that you put on Facebook, and word of mouth. And it's basically, if you've ever taken a writing class and they've told you about when, you're writing a news story, there's the 5 W's and the H. You need to know, you want people to know who you are, what you need, when you need help, where you live, and how they should respond. And if you fill that out, those short things, and keep it concise, you will be ready at the drop of a hat. If somebody said, oh, I might know someone, you can blurt out, I am a 42-year-old female who uses a power wheelchair. I'm looking for a personal care aide to assist with dressing, showers, and meals. I need you Monday through Friday morning. I live near Interstate 77 and Route 18, and I have a service dog, talking about your pets is a huge priority. Always remember your pets or your service animals, because you don't want somebody to show up at your door not like dogs and leave. And then how to get in touch with you. Your level of creativity starts with where you're going to put this ad, and you need to really think broader, but you always are going to start with, you know, daily newspapers, weekly newspapers, whether that's print or electronic, Facebook, Instagram, all your social media outlets. There are websites like care.com where you can post, your church newsletter, on bulletin boards at schools, on bulletin boards at the rec centers, and bulletin boards in coffee shops, the library, anywhere and everywhere. Anywhere there's a bulletin board, have a piece of paper, put it up. And hopefully that will then get you someone who will respond. And at that point you have to go through the interview process. So typically you're gonna, you know, people are gonna get in touch with you either by phone or email, or maybe they're gonna message you on social media. So you're gonna start like by getting the basics, and that's the easiest thing to get in an electronic form. And then you're gonna wanna go next to trying to have a more in-person, whether it's face-to-face or on the phone. You know, reading, you can read a lot into text messages that maybe isn't there, but when you hear someone talk to you and you can ask them questions in more detail than what they can type, or if you're face-to-face and be able to read body language, it's very helpful. And that's where you're going to get into, you know, their experience and qualifications. And in your packet, I have an interview questionnaire, and it's a good place to start, but by all means, it's not what you have to do. But you know, you want to get stuff like their work experience and you know, things that are relevant to you. Have they ever worked with someone who has, you know, the needs that you have? Do they have, you know, are relevant likes and dislikes to you? You know, your personal care aide is going to be a very intimate relationship on a lot of levels for some people. So you have to make sure that, you know, their personality is going to jive with you. And then you're going to go through availability, and on the questionnaire, I have a chart for their availability for kind of morning, noon, evening, night, but also for all your major holidays, because, you know, I have to get out of bed on Christmas. Somebody's got to help me. So you want to really cover the bases as much as possible when you're over the phone or in person, because it's your one opportunity to really get all the information. Even if it's someone that you're not sure if you'd want to work with, a month from now you might need them and they might have better availability, and you may have misread them. So if you have their information, you're going to always go back to it. In the packet, I also have a reference of questions to avoid. When you're interviewing, you can't ask someone what their religion is. You can't ask them if they're married. You can't ask them what their current salary is. You can ask things in different ways to try to glean the information. And on this reference guide, I have some suggestions for, you know, if you are trying to ascertain what their religion is, you can always ask them if there are days of the week or times of the day that they're not available. And a lot of people will say, well, I'm not available on Sunday, or, you know, I'm a Seventh-day Adventist, and from Saturday at sundown to Sunday at sundown, all year long, I'm not available. I have had someone like that, but I didn't know that until we started talking about their availability. So on that list, there's a bunch of things you can't ask, but ways to try to get around it, you know, so that you can have a good picture of who these people are. And the last thing with the interviewing process is checking references. I hate this part. I skip this part a lot. And then I go back and realize, you dummy. Like, they sounded great, but they were telling me anything they wanted to tell me. So I have in the packet both a paper that's called a reference authorization, which is pretty formal, but you know, it's a way for them to write down their references and then sign that it's okay that you can talk to these people. And I also have a reference questionnaire that covers, you know, having a reference that's a personal reference, like a family member, and a professional reference. And really, they both have merit. From a professional reference, you're gonna find out, you know, their work experience, their professional interactions with, you know, other consumers or coworkers or supervisors. And the personal reference is a lot of times family or friends, and you're gonna learn more about their character, more about how they interact with people. And because, like I said, the personal care assistant is a very, you know, close relationship, knowing about their character can be really important. It can make or break the situation. But definitely always call. Don't do what I do and do it after the fact, just to say you did it. You know, hopefully you will get a couple people who respond, you'll go through the process, and you'll find someone that you want to work with, and you know, you'll offer the position and they'll take it. And right there, you know, you've made them the offer, you've talked about salary in the interview, or when you call them to make the offer, you go over the specifics of how things are going to be paid. But that's not where I think it kind of stops. You also have a few more things you can check about the person now that you're really interested in them. If they're going to be driving you, it's a good thing to try to look up their driving record, and that requires getting some information as far as their date of birth, social security number, all of which, you know, you wouldn't ask for in an interview, but once you're going to work together, people are more apt to turn that information over. And a copy of their insurance if they're going to be driving you. And also, there are opportunities now to do a background check on people. In the packet I included an authorization for a background check, which would be where they would provide their pertinent information, which would be their old addresses, their name, their date of birth, I think, and social security number, and then you know, they'll sign that you can run it. And there are a lot of places now online that you can run background checks if you Google it. And also, I think if you go to, the Ohio Attorney General's website, they offer ways to run background checks. The other thing you want to do before somebody starts working is get any employment paperwork you have to get done. If you're going to be paying them and paying their taxes, you need to get those documents finalized. If you're going to turn them into a new Medicaid independent provider, you have to get that application going. You have to get their, you know, all of their certifications going for that. If you have Medicaid and you have a managed care provider, they have to be credentialed through your managed care provider, so you have to make sure all that's in place. And you want to make sure that's all in place before the first day they walk in so that they can bill. And then, of course, you want to confirm their availability, and you want to determine their start date, make sure everything's set so everybody knows, you know, how the process is all going to move forward. At this point, also, it's worthwhile, if you haven't already, to develop a responsibility checklist. For every shift that I have people coming into the house, I have a breakdown of the first thing I like them to do when they get there, what my personal care needs are going to be and how to do it, what maybe the homemaking things I need are going to be and how to do it, and what to do before they leave. I'm pretty hands-on with people who are in my house, but I have people in my house overnight, and I have to sleep. I cannot micromanage them all night long. So having a checklist helps me feel like at least that's going to get done. And if a you know, I have to start a new person and they're not exactly sure what to do and I'm not right there, they have a list. So that is something that I always recommend, using your job duty worksheet to set up a checklist that you can go over with each person on your shift as you move forward. And then I also recommend that you try to get them in before their shifts start to train. Hopefully you have an aide still with you that you think works up to your standards, that you can have your new person come in and shadow. Doesn't have to be the whole shift. It can be, you know, for an hour out of the 4-hour shift to hit the highlights. And I also have a training checklist in the packet so that you can write down the things that are very specific to you that you really want to make sure, you know, they have a good handle on. It can be the way you like to have your showers done. It can be how to operate your wheelchair when you're not in it. It could be, you know, how to prepare your breakfast if you like it a certain way. How to wash your clothes. How to take care of your service dog or, you know, your service animals, or how to help you with other family in the home. Whatever you think is a specialized task for you, it's good to have a training checklist to make sure you cover it, and then sign and date it when you feel like that person has mastered it. And it's something you can start on that shadow, you know, before they start their working with you. And then you should have some sort of activity log or timesheet. If they're a self-hire, an activity log is a really good way to make sure that everything you need done is being accounted for, and that you sign it off and they sign it off. For Medicaid, you have to keep these papers. Your independent provider will have a structural review. They'll have to take them with them. So there is one in the packet, and it's a good thing to have even if you have a self-hire, so that if there are disagreements down the road or you need to, some kind of conflict arises, you can go back to a document and say, you know, these are the things I need, but you're not, it shows here you're not completing them, or these are the things you used to complete, but now they're not getting done. The last thing that I have in the packet is a work agreement. And it's something that, until I started looking into this, I never thought to do, and now I do it all the time. Because it covers schedule, it covers their responsibility, it covers the wages, covers call-off procedures, vacation time, holidays, a lot of things that you don't always want to talk about, but if it's in a document, you handle it, it's done, everybody is, you know, on the same page, and it's something you can refer back to. So in the packet I also have a sample work agreement. And then very briefly, the last thing is kind of how to manage and maintain this relationship. And I think the key is clearly defining work responsibilities and expectations through an open discussion where both parties are able to express their thoughts and suggestions. I think you have to remember that though you are kind of the employer and they're the employee, it's a very symbiotic relationship you need to have with your personal care assistant. And although you may think you have in your mind the best way to do everything for you, there are times when these people, when you know you start with a new person and they've had experiences that if they share them with you, you have an aha, why don't I do it that way moment. I've had aides for 15 years and I still have them. So it is important to always communicate. And then I have a few steps that are kind of what I call Management 101. And I recommend that you periodically reevaluate work responsibilities. At the start, you know, you're laying everything out. Everybody's very much focused on what you need and how to do it. And over time, everyone gets kind of slack. You let things slide, they let things slide. So reevaluating that over time to time reminds you of, you know, what you need, and helps remind them of how you need things to be run. And that also is for your expectations. You know, if you really were hoping that this person would be able to get you out of bed every morning and in the shower, and it could all be said and done in an hour, and it's still taking an hour and a half, it's good to say, you know, I really wanted this to streamline down to an hour. How can we get that to happen? And asking for suggestions and input. I really find that even my most inexperienced aides, once they learn what I like and how I like it, they may see ways that for them it's easier to do it. And so if I ask them about it, they may have a suggestion that I didn't think of that I can then pass on. And just having that dialogue and making people feel like they are part of everything that happens, they're not just being pointed and directed, really builds a good relationship and really helps to keep the relationship going. The other thing I think is you need to acknowledge good performance. It can be anything. If somebody made your breakfast extra great, let them know. You know, if somebody helped you handle a situation that came up that you weren't expecting, and they made it less stressful for you, let them know. You can keep people happy and keep yourself happy that way really easily. And the last thing I think is you have to be polite and respectful. You know, if you are just saying, do this, do that, I need this, I need that, if you throw in a please and a thank you, I mean, this is what I find where I'm teaching my nieces and nephew, and they're 9 and under, I have to remind myself the same thing. It doesn't cost any money, it doesn't take any time, but the reward is huge. And all of that is all about communication. Talking with the people you have in your home, have around you. They're with you all the time, so why wouldn't you talk to them? And just as people, but also for the, you know, the nuts and bolts of what you need. And I think with the communication, it will help you manage the stress of all of the situation, because, I mean, let's be honest, this is a very stressful thing. When you are hiring your own personal care assistants and managing it, it is a 24/7, 365-day-a-year job. I very rarely have everything in place and moving smoothly. And when I do, I know that it could be an hour a day where that's all going to change. And that is very stressful. It is. And it is not for everybody, which is why there are other traditional routes to go through. But if you temper your expectations, realize that you are dealing with a person, that they will make mistakes, you will make mistakes, there's always room to grow, then it will help manage the stress. And just communicating, just explaining to people, I'm having a hard day, this is stressful to me, I need help, that will help you get through the process. And, you know, telling people, anyone here, you know, I hire IPs, right now I'm really flush, right now I have somebody who wants to work and I don't have hours to give them. You know, communicating that out to the world will help me maybe find that person, someone to work with, maybe help me keep this person that I want to keep as a backup, because I can get them a little work on the side, then they're learning, then they feel like, okay, she helped me find a job, I'll come and help her in a pinch. It takes a lot to do it, but it is definitely doable. And I think the final thing I will leave you with is that you are the leader of your team. All of this work that you're going to do to find a personal care assistant and to keep them and to go through it day after day, it's all for your benefit. So if it's too much for you, you have to find something that's easier. If it's not working out with someone, you need to do the things that you need to do to make it better. If that's trying to work it through with someone, if that's finding a replacement, you have to remember that you have to advocate for yourself You have to talk for yourself, and you have to make sure that everything that's happening is to your benefit. And by leading your team, that will really get you, I think, successful through the process. So I apologize for not being able to show the PowerPoint. I can come back and run it another day if you really want. Anything that you want to go over, you can get in touch with me. Megan can put out my information.
On the financial end of it, I don't know if you know this, but Ohio does offer, excuse me, a reimbursement program for caregiver.
Yeah, it's like all things like that. There are all kinds of, you know, different stipulations and way to go about it, but the best way to find things is hopefully, you know, through the internet or through word of mouth. So thank you for that. So I don't know if anybody has any questions or if I, you know, drowned you with information, but
Just one question.
mhm.
If you hire someone on, and I'm not familiar with the normal hourly rate would be or something like that, what's an idea of ballpark or something that you would offer someone to come, you know, with you versus
Sure.
going somewhere else or something like that? What's a figure that you might toss out as something?
I think if you call an agency and you're gonna pay out of pocket, what they're gonna tell you is in the high 20s. If you're looking for your own person, right now, I think you can offer 15 and out of pocket, and you'll get a lot of responses. Medicaid will pay right now, it's like $12.50. And I have been able to get people to work with me for that. Agencies are only, though they are going to charge you $27 an hour, they're paying on the good end $9.50. So if you're offering, a lot of times if you're offering people $11 an hour, they're gonna jump at it, especially if you say, let's start here and we can see what else we can do.
But there costs to be a minimum number of hours too for a shift with an agency. They won't send someone for an hour.
Right. Yeah.
There's a minimum.
Yeah.
Minimum time.
Yeah, so you have more flexibility if you're hiring an independent provider as far as, you know, sometimes you only need them to come for an hour to get you in bed. But an agency, like you said, won't do that. You know, sometimes you need them for an 8-hour to overnight, and I find it's very hard to staff that with an agency. So there is a lot more flexibility when you're looking at independent providers. So yeah, I mean, for me, it's just really creativity. Yeah. But, you know, if it's something that you're interested in and you're nervous about starting it, I have honestly probably turned 24 people into Medicaid independent providers. So I know how to work the system. I know, I mean, I've had to go through some lengths to do it, but it gives me freedom and it lets me be more independent, lets my family be more independent.
Any other questions? Awesome. Thank you so much. That was great. There's tickets if you're interested. Jeff has Cavs tickets. Otherwise, thanks for coming. Have a great night. Next month, the Center for Independent Living will be here, and the topic will be emergency preparedness. That's a services for independent living will be here. And the topic will be emergency preparedness, which is
Joanne and I are doing the traditional Thanksgiving feast.
We'll have Thanksgiving feast, so hope to see you next month. Third Monday, I think it's like the 18th, I don't know what that Monday, whatever that third Monday is. But yeah, and if you have any suggestions for next year, let me know.
turkey and
Cool. Have a good night.
Sure. Dressing for the pumpkin pie.
You don't need anything else, huh?
Mean Girls.
We got it all covered.
Two.
We've done it 5 years ago.
December 5th or December 8th?
Thursday the week of
The 5th is a Thursday, the 8th is a Sunday.
They all same time.
Thursday and Sunday.
Sundays, or, wait. Thursday is the 5th, so, yeah, I said the 5th. Thursday is 7:30, Sunday is 3:30.
Can't see it.
Great, thank you.
We got 3 days.
Thank you.
Can't stick it, you do. Go to Canton. Right.
Awesome, thanks for joining us on the live stream.